Hey guys, Darren here, Coach your Wise your Pods, and welcome back to another episode of the AFL Fantasy Preseason for 2026. On today's episode, we are going to be starting our player positions series. If you haven't been a long-term viewer of the channel, I do this every single year where we run through the individual positions for AFL Fantasy. Today we'll be discussing premium defenders. So I've broken it up a little bit more this year rather than just having all the defenders in one video. I think it would be good to run through premium defenders this video, and then the next video we'll discuss, the value options, and then another video after that, or later down the track, we'll even talk about the rookies as a whole across all the lines. So hope you stayed tuned for all that. But yeah, let's get straight into it.
All the pain.
As I said, we will be talking about the premium defenders today. So I'll be going through the top 10 priced defenders and just giving some of my thoughts around, what the price point at. Is it worth paying up for them? And, do I see some improvement? But one thing I wanted to start off with before we jump into the individual players is really have a quick discussion around, why we would select a premium player. I know a lot of different people play this game differently, especially in more recent years. It's all been value, value, value. Never pay top dollar for anyone. But there is a space for premiums in your starting squad, in my opinion. We have a squad of 30, and we've got 24 rounds of the AFL Fantasy season, so it can be quite difficult when you don't start players that are already top of the line to really continue moving them on and trading them out to then be able to finish your side within an appropriate amount of time to, contender. It is quite hard. So it is important that we do have players that are top of their line. They can maximize their scoring. And also, the biggest thing is captain options. Obviously, we all need captains each and every week. Ideally, you want two at least. For vice captain and captaincies to maximize your captain options as much as possible. I like to play with at least 3 captain options to start the year. That's what I did last year, and I probably had my best result in terms of captain output all year, all my career in fantasy. So I think that's a bit of a nice area to be in, having those different options, because at the end of the day, we all know these premiums, they get tagged on certain games that have bad matchups, so then you avoid them for captaincy that week. So it is really important that I think we look at premium starting options in our team, and defenders especially is one the trend are showing that these guys are becoming the better scorers in AFL fantasy overall. There's minimal tags coming to them because they're off halfback. They're not being as damaging in terms of hitting the scoreboard. So a lot of teams are just tagging the midfielders or more half forward that are the damaging types rather than these halfbackers that, yes, use the ball well, but aren't as damaging when it comes to the scoreboard. So they are a bit more of a safer pick, and I feel like their floor is a lot higher than those that are in the midfield or other positions that can get tagged and have these really bad low games. So that's a quick little discussion on why I think it's important to have and consider these top line guys in the defensive line. The other side of this is this year, I feel like the defensive line is probably the easiest we've had it for a while. We've probably got 3 easy picks in the likes of Nick Newman, Miles Bergman, and Kitty Coleman. If you want to go there, I know some people are a bit often hot and cold with him at the moment. So those 3 for me, if you see my team reveal, are in my side, and they have been locked away since the game opened up, or even months before that. Leading into the season anyway. So I feel like there's a lot of value in there at the moment, and there's probably 4 or 5 others that I'm highly considering that aren't these premium types that I'm still weighing up as like, okay, do I pay up for these guys to, have these captaincy options, or do I, save a little bit of money, spread the love a little bit in the defensive line to be able to have a bit of a deeper defensive line, and then try and really maximize that cash generation early, even though I may have some limited more captaincy options down the line. So there's a lot of things to weigh up. I think the forward line's probably where you want to pay up for these top line guys that you're more confident in, because it is the most struggling line in terms of selection. So the defensive line, it'll be an interesting one. But let's dive straight into, the first, well, the big man himself, Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera. He went absolute bonkers in 2025. Really broke out. He just became an absolute beast, and he's the first $2 million player, which is incredible to see happen. I'm surprised he stayed at St Kilda after a lot of speculation that he was going to go to Port Adelaide. Obviously, being great mates with a lot of those guys over there, I do expect him to go there in the next, once his contract is up. When he turns 24, which he will still be prime age by then. It's so crazy that he's still only 22 and how good he is already. But he's priced at 110.8. He's got that price tag of $1.163 million, so it's gonna cost you a fair bit. But like I said, he had that best fantasy career so far, and I don't even know if this is what his ceiling's gonna be. Obviously, he improved on his average from 2024, where he went at a 97 average, so ticked over that 100 mark pretty comfortably, putting an extra 10 points on it, so he just got it done. And we saw some massive scores from him, which was a real positive sign that, this guy can be absolutely anything. Particularly in the back half of the season, we started to see these 150s, 147s, and consistently hitting the 110, 120s in easy matchups. So yeah, it was really pleasing to see, and he'll definitely be someone that you could look at. The only problem, he does have round 4 bye, which is the easiest of the bye rounds, I will admit. So it's not that much of an issue, but it's an argument we have every single year since the opening round has come in for the last 2 or 3 years, is that when you're picking a premium, you don't want them to have these opening round buys because they're missing a game no matter what you think. Whereas you could pick another one, just for an example, is Connor Rosie, who doesn't have that, and he's going to have that extra game up his sleeve to be able to put more points into your team for your overall total score for the end of the year, right? So it just doesn't make sense to start with someone that is missing a game at some point early on in the year. So that's the real big argument for me, is that I don't know if I could start him. And the biggest thing for me is that now that he's really broken out, he became one of the biggest star in like the back half of last year. He will now start to cop a lot of attention. I think that a lot of teams are going to send tags to him because he is damaging. He's hitting the scoreboard. We all remember back to that game he had against the likes of Melbourne, where he just won that game off his own back. He kicked the 4 goals, had the 2 last ones, and obviously kicked it after the siren. And we all remember that game. He should have got the 3 Brownlow points for that one, but he didn't, funnily enough. But yeah, I feel like he's going to cop a lot more attention this year than what he has recently seen, and that's something that a lot of new players, and especially younger players being 22, they do struggle with quite frequently to start off with. So I feel like we may see a slight drop from him. So for me, I'm not selecting him, not at the price range that he's at, but I can see why people would be definitely enticed, because there's no guarantee that these tags are going to be, the be or end all for him. He does know how to float back into the defensive line, and he does demand the ball just at will. He can go into the kickouts. We've seen that in the past couple of years, and he's been great at that as a just outside the top 6 defenders for us. So there is scope for him to just be able to do what he wants around the ground, very similar to the likes of Harry Sheezel. A couple of years back when he was in the half-back role, he just demands the ball all over the ground. So I could easily see a 115 average for the likes of Nasiah Wanganeen-Malera, but I think just with the tags coming his way, I do think that will bring him back down just that tad. I predict he probably will average 107 for the year. So it really, if you're paying 111 and he drops down to 107, he was still a lock for top 6 no matter what. Could even be number 1. But yeah, I just don't know if I'm paying up for him this year. If he didn't have the buy, then he'd definitely be in the conversation. But I just feel like there's a couple other premiums that are a bit cheaper, don't have the buy, and yeah, have probably a bit more upside to them as well. So, but some of the stats I had for him: when he had 50% plus CBAs, he averaged 118. This was across 6 games, so pretty small sample size. And again, it could be against some decent, sorry, it could be against some easier matchups as well, so the numbers could be inflated. He did have some big scores of 151. We saw that one against the Cats. They're an easier team to score against. That 147 was obviously against Melbourne. They were a basket case, and yeah, we know what they're out like. And 131, which I don't even know where that was. Yeah, against Brisbane. So that one was probably the outlier, because they were the toughest matchup in uh, fantasy league throughout the entire year. Even his time on ground was quite low as well. So when he does get the time in the midfield and he does get a free run on it, he just demands the ball and can hit these big ceiling scores as well. So he's going to be a great captain option in the year to come. His kick to handle ratio is something I also wanted to mention. I think a lot of people don't realize how important it is to have these kick to handle ratios, because every single kick over a handle just gives you that extra point of creep to give us the best output he can. So he is definitely a good foot user, so he will continue to be like that. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. And at the end of the day, they want him to have the ball in hand to be able to kick that into the forward line. If not hitting the scoreboard, then hitting his teammates on the chest. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in 2026. But another downside I had quickly for him, I know I've already wasted so much time on just one player, but he's not a tackler. He's not a big tackler. Look at some of these numbers. He sort of averages like 2, maybe 3 at most tackles in a game. So when it comes to tags, I feel like his floor is going to be quite low, because he's not that tackler that, when they're being pushed off the ball and they're not able to get the ball in hands, then they're not also getting the tackles to be able to bump up their score and just tick it along. We've seen that in the past a lot with other players. Nick Dacos comes to mind. Whenever he gets tagged, he drops 70s and low 80s, because he's not a huge tackler either. He's probably a little bit better in that space than what Nasai is, in my opinion. So I feel like Nasai's floor could be quite low if he does cop attention, and he doesn't find a way to maneuver himself around the ground to be able to increase his scoring output elsewhere. So that's Nasai. For me, I'm not going there, but his ownership's at 30% already, so he is quite a popular starting option. Just quickly looking at his fixture, I will touch on all the fixtures coming up, but it is probably one of the tougher matchups in terms of fixtures. So just looking at the first 5, Collingwood, sort of middle of the table. Who knows what they're sort of going to be in 2026? Melbourne will be easy as Giants, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Port Adelaide will be tough. So it's not the greatest start in terms of the first 5. So that's just something to note as well. So, but we'll move on. Lockie Whitfield is the next one. He is priced at 105, so nearly 6 points drop from Nasiah Wanganimilera, so that just showed you how good Nasiah was for the year. But Lockie Whitfield is down on his 109 average that he had in 2024, so it does, on face value, he definitely has a little bit of scope to improve. But he had pretty much a very consistent year. He didn't really probably have the heights of what he had in 2024, where we were seeing consistent 140s, a 160 at one point, constantly hitting these 130s, 120s. I feel like his ceiling was capped a little bit with the move of Lockie Ash going into the back line and taking a bit more of a role back there. We all know how great he was, and we will talk about him very, very shortly. But he didn't. The thing that surprised me a little bit more with Lockie Whitfield this year was that in years going just past, is he used to get tagged a fair bit, and we saw these really low floor games from him. This year, there was only one tagged game, and somehow he went 143. I guess that was the Adelaide game. I guess it was just a very late tag. He's just absolutely killing him at the halfback, and they would have thrown a player to them in the last quarter or something like that. But it's been counted as he's been tagged. So he didn't get any attention at all this year. But like I said, his ceilings weren't as high, but he did have 7 games where he went sub 100. including this 23, where he got injured fairly on, only 19% there. So one thing we like to do in preseason is look at these injured games, remove them, and when we can easily see what they would have averaged. So if we remove that score, he would have averaged 110 for the year. So that on face value shows you that he is potentially 5 points unders of what he can do for the year. But we all know Lockie Whitfield, if you've been a long term player of the game, he always seems to have at least 1 or 2 games where he just cops a bit of an injury. He goes off. He's the lack of better of a word is he's a bit fragile in that sense. Like he cops a bit of an awkward knee and he just goes off and then he's done for the game or something like that. Or he cops a bit of a head knock. He's had the concussion issues in the past, so it doesn't surprise me that he's had an injury score in there, and I'd highly expect he will have another one in 2026. So it's something I don't want to factor in too much, but just off face value, if you're looking for someone that has a bit of upside, Lockie Whitfield does have probably 5 points of upside straight in his price range. So definitely something to be worthy of. But he's definitely is certainly going to be a lock for top 6. You know, this guy has been a fantasy beast for us for best part of his most of his career, to be honest. He's 31 now, going to be 32 this year. So yeah, he's just been an absolute gun. Does 32 now affect his output? I don't think so. I think with Lockie Ash, he's just going to continue to do his output. You know, one thing that surprised me a little bit was that even though Lockie Ash came into the his sort of space, he took more kick-ins from Lockie Whitfield. So let me rephrase that. Lockie Whitfield's kick-ins dropped a fair bit with Lockie Ash coming in. I hate that they're both named Lockie. It confuses the heck out of me. So it didn't drop his fantasy output at all. Obviously, averaged 109 last year. He could have averaged 110 without the injured score. So yeah, it shows you what it hasn't really changed at all, no matter, even with that sort of slight shift. So it surprised me a little bit, but I think it will just be another consistent year this year. I don't think anything's going to change. So again, he's just a very safe pick as a premium option. The one thing that I've been looking into a little bit more is he was the highest player to have transition points in the league. So we all know the way the AFL is trending these days, that they want this, huge transition game, quick, move the ball quickly by foot or hand, running it as quick as you can up and down the ground to have this really fast-paced football. He is just by far the top fantasy scorer for transition points. So when you're setting the bar so high, it feels like there's no real scope to go any higher. His only scope is to go down for me and join the pack of everybody else. But this is Lockie Whitfield we're talking about. He's been the best in the game for a long time at this transition footy, and he just demands the ball wherever he goes. So yeah, I can see why he's a bit of an appeal for a lot of people to start with him, and he's definitely in consideration for my team as well. Because if we look at his fixture, while the Hawks aren't a good matchup, obviously in opening round, that doesn't really bother us because it doesn't actually affect our team too much besides his price movement. So this could influence a lot of people's choice to actually physically start him. If he were to go absolutely massive, then he could easily jump on him, because if you look at his next 5 sort of games, Bulldogs are always a nice green matchup. He's averaged very well against them. St Kilda have always been a great matchup. Whether they'll get better this year, who knows in terms of that space. Collingwood, again, middle of the table, and then Richmond also is a very nice matchup. So he could start off the year very, very well and get us off to a bit of a flyer, averaging 120s. Good captaincy option. So yeah, definitely worthwhile option there. I did forget to mention that he does have the round 4 bye as well, same as Nasiah Wang and Imilera. So those two are very in the similar camp as such. But I feel like if I had to choose one, I lean towards Lockie Whitfield at this stage, just because he has that a little bit of upside to him with that 5-point inbuilt price range. So yeah, that's just one thing. But the one thing, again, I don't want to go on about it too much, but I felt like his ceiling wasn't as big as what it has been in the past with Lockie Ash beside him. So that's one factor I do want to stress to people that are looking to start him is, yeah, if you're looking to use him as a a captaincy option, you may not get the massive ceilings that you're looking for, but you'll get consistent sort of 120s every single week, which is not bad. I'm not saying that, but yeah, we're all striving for these massive 150 games wherever we can, and I just don't know if I see that with Lockie Whitfield as much coming into the new year, because we only saw it twice last year where he just hit those 140s. So yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had on Lockie Whitfield. Definitely a worthwhile pick there. Is 7.6% owned, so definitely a little bit lower. I'm actually a little surprised about that because I thought he was probably a little bit highly owned than that. But this next option is Connor Rosie. Now, he is by far the most selected of the premium defenders, just a tick over 50% already. So he is one that, you know, he improved his role and improved his average from 2024. So he went up from 95 average to this 104 price tag that he's at now, with a pretty healthy price tag of just under $1.1 million. So it's going to cost you a fair bit, but we saw that he had a bit of a role change last year. That he was an inside mid, and with the transition, whether it was Josh Carr's instruction or for whatever reason, he went to a halfback distributor role, with the likes of Houston being moved on to, well, not moved on, he got traded to Collingwood. They had a hole back there that they were looking to fill with a good ball user, and that's what Connor Rosie sort of came in and was able to fill that for us. So that was a real big positive, and we did get to see that he was going really well. Fixture, I wanted to look at this is obviously a huge talking about. I'm sure you haven't, if you've listened to other podcasts every now and then, we've all heard that Port have a phenomenal starting fixture. So first 5 rounds, I don't really need to elaborate too much. He's just could start with anything, could have some massive ceilings, and obviously will be a great captaincy option if you wanted to go there. He's taking majority of the kick-ins and plays on 100%. But again, one thing that concerns me and why I'm sort of toying with the plans of not starting him is because of all the value in the backline, is that he averaged 107 when he went in the halfback role when he had 12 games. That's 12 game sample size, so he has a little bit of upside there. 3 or 4 points, nothing major, right? The only thing that gives me a little bit of concern is that he, again, didn't have the biggest ceiling when he was on the halfback there. So if I go into here and I show you some scores, I can hopefully try and find some decent ones for you. Obviously, the blue sign means that he had the CBA numbers, so he did have a few CBA numbers. Did go back into an inside mid for the final 4 games of the year, which is a little bit concerning in terms of what we expect going forward. I do expect him to continue as a halfback distributor for Port Adelaide. I think they have plenty of other inside mids for them, but I could also see him be thrown forward because he also was quite a damaging forward for them as well. So there is some speculation around what his role is going to be. But if we just look at a lot of his scores when he was as a halfbacker, which is sort of shown here through this symbol here, you can see what's a mid, what's a halfback, flanker, and whatnot. Through this sort of period where he was just a halfback, if you look at all the scores here, he didn't really have the biggest ceiling. Like, there's a lot of consistent over 100s. Like, he had I didn't actually write it down, but yeah, a lot of over 100, right? Very consistent, but he just really lacked a lot of that big ceiling, like where you see him as an inside mid. He had that 145, 142 as an inside mid, but his biggest score of halfback was that 126. So he doesn't have the biggest ceiling. So that's what concerns me with selecting him as a premium for us, is that if we're going to be using him as a captaincy option, it's not going to be the biggest ceiling as well, whereas we want to try and maximize that as much as possible. We also saw him get tagged a fair bit. Like, these symbols here signal that he was tagged somehow through that game. Again, he still did amazingly. Like, if we just select all those tagged games off halfback, he still averaged 111 or 112. But yeah, most of those tags would have been, he's just absolutely dominating, and they threw someone at him to keep him accountable for, the second half of the game or something like that. But this damage was already done at that point, so I try not to look at that too much. But yeah, obviously was a bit of a tag option for them in the halfback, which is a bit surprising because obviously Zach Butters is in the midfield, who I feel is a lot more damaging in that sense. Obviously winning it out of the middle and hitting the scoreboard. So I would have thought they would have tagged Zach Butters a lot more ahead of him. So that's all I really had on the likes of Connor Rosie. The other thing that I want we need to sort of speak about is talks of Port Adelaide sort of changing their game style. Obviously, their game style is a huge factor when it comes to AFL fantasy, because if they choose to slow it down and really possess the ball a lot, it usually means that they're going to have a lot of fantasy points within the team overall. And Port Adelaide weren't the greatest in terms of fantasy points overall last year. I don't have the exact figures, but yeah, they were definitely sort of middle table to the below end of the table. So if they only really have scope to increase that. So if what is true, if being the rumors are true that they're going to look to slow it down and obviously chip it around a little bit more, obviously Rosie is going to be a benefit of that if he's in this halfback distributor role. So that could be something that we should really be encouraged with. But again, we're going to have to wait and see that in the practice games. He does not have the opening round, so we will not be able to get a visual in a proper game, unfortunately. We'll only have practice games to go off of. So fingers crossed he's in those to play that, so we can sort of get a visual on what's going to happen. But yeah, obviously the having no early buy is one of the biggest factors of why Connor Rosie is so highly owned, because of the list of premium defenders in this list, there's not many that don't have the early buy. So he's going to get that extra game above everybody. He's got that little bit of price creep if he continues this role. So yeah, there's a lot of things pointing in Connor Rosie's favor that I can see why a lot of people are starting him, and that's why he's in my team currently. But we'll have to wait and see how that develops throughout the preseason. Zorko at number 4 here. It's amazing to me that he is going to be 37 this year and still doing what he's been doing for the last couple of years. He is down a little bit on his last year's average. Obviously, he went to that massive high of 110 average in 2024, but he's down at 102 this year. And I think that was just through the emergence of the likes of Fletcher and Wilmot, who both increased their fantasy outputs to sort of 80s and 60s, 65 sort of ranges. I think Wilmot maybe even got to 70. I can't remember exactly. But both of them increased their fantasy average and took more responsibility in that halfback role. So it was obviously natural that, some gain, some lose. So they're going to have to look to go past Zorko at some stage. He's going to retire at some stage. It may be this year. It may not be this year. I dare say if they get the three-peat, he would retire. That's just my early call. If they go back to back to back, that he would just finish on a high. He's given everything he can to this club, and he's been a champion in multiple different facets of the game, where he was a midfielder, then he went forward, and now he's gone to this halfback role to prolong his career. But yeah, he's been amazing. But can we select him as a premium option for us in fantasy? I am really reluctant to this. I just look at the age and it concerns me, but I shouldn't be concerned, because his last 2 seasons have been complete without injury. We all know he had injuries prior to that, and he had struggles. But for the last 2 seasons, he has not missed a game at all. He's getting these dry needling. He's keeping as fit as possible. So yeah, he's just absolutely getting it done. Having a look at some of his scores here. He had 12 games that were over 110 plus, so again, very consistent. The one thing, again, that concerns me with these halfback defenders as picking them as captain options, as I said, again, he didn't have the hugest ceiling. Like last year in 2024, the year prior to that now, he had a massive 160s, 180s, I think it even was. 184 against that game was just nuts. Consistent 150s. He just was able to hit the park so often with these big scores. Whereas in 2025, he only had a max score of 137, so really not, the top echelon of this scoring capacity that we'd all want as a captain option. He really had no tags as well, so again, it surprises me for someone that is quite damaging off halfback, and can regularly hit the scoreboard off halfback as well. That he doesn't cop more attention, and he had no injuries either, like I said. So he is just priced exactly at what his performance was. So for me, there is no chance of improvement in his price range. So that puts him behind all the other three that I've already spoken about, even at his cheaper price range. But we all know he's the kick-in king. He had 142 kick-ins and had played on 136 times. So he just loves to play on every single time, and he's going to probably continue that this year, I'd expect. But some negatives I want to talk about is obviously Coleman coming back into the fold with from his injury. Obviously, he's been out for the best part of 2 years now. How is that going to affect the likes of Zorko? We highly expect that, we've seen Coleman in the past be this sort of 70 averaging player. I assume he may even go a bit better than that in the right role. So those points have to come from somewhere, and I'd hardly expect it looks like it could come from Dane Zorko. So, like I said, they're going to have to go past him at some point, and this is the year I suspect they're going to maybe bring him back a little bit, manage him through. Like I said, he is very, very old for an AFL fantasy player, an AFL player, so they're going to have to manage him where they can. So for me, that's just enough red flags that I just wouldn't look at the likes of Zorko. Besides also having the opening round and the round 2 bye, which is the trickiest of the lot. Obviously having 4 teams on that bye and having a lot of fantasy relevant sort of players already in that sort of round already. So there's a lot of reasons why I just wouldn't go with this guy, unfortunately. But last point I had on him was just he went at 119 in the final game, so the the prelim and whatnot. He just went really, really well. It doesn't actually show it here in fantasy, but his final campaign he went at 119 to show that he still has a really big influence on their game style, and in big games he performs. So yeah, I still think he will be there or thereabouts in the mix of the premium defenders. But I guess if I had to make a big call, it would be that Zorko drops out of our top 6 defenders of this year, with a few emergence of some other guys around him, and obviously some other guys in the league pushing up as well. So been a very good contribute. I'm not going to write him off just yet, but yeah. But also his ownership there is at 1.6%, so very lowly owned. I think a lot of the fantasy community are well on top of his, his ownership there. The next one we have, I might just quickly take a drink. We're only done 4. I've got 6 more to go, and I've already gone half now. I love the chat, don't I? But we'll move on to Jack Sinclair now. He is priced at 101. He is the definition of consistency. If we were to, I'll show you this just because it amazed me when I went back and looked at it and did a bit more research on it, is that he is the definition of consistency. He has averaged 102 or thereabouts for the last 4 years. He just does not know how to waver from that at all. So yeah, I think we can confidently say that paying his price range at 101, you're going to get 101, 102 average for the entire year. So that's one thing that I think we can set in stone, that doesn't not going to change, right? On the surface, I think one thing that I initially thought of, obviously with the St Kilda backline and whatnot, is that with Nasiah, Wanganeen Malira obviously moving into more of a predominant midfield role, that would free up a lot of potential for Sinclair to take more points in the backline, right? But looking into it, it actually wasn't that the case. I looked at all these averages when the likes of Nasiah was in the midfield. I can't really show you here because you need to sort of compare Nasiah's numbers and Sinclair's numbers side by side. But he went at an average of 98. So yes, not a huge decrease in terms of overall average, but it was enough to give me enough confidence to say that Nasai is not going to have that big of an influence on his, fantasy output. He's going to be very similar. It's not going to be any better, I wouldn't have thought. He's still going to have a majority of the kick-ins and just be the same sort of guy he has been for a long time. They've also brought in other guys as well. Jack Savani is another guy that they've brought in to be sort of a good ball user off halfback to sort of replace Nasai Wanganimulura back there. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes back there, whether he takes some kick-ins off Jack Sinclair, because I think Jack has been, on the outer at sometimes in St Kilda camp with Ross Lyon. He's been shuffled around willy-nilly at stages. So yeah, there's no guarantee that his role is going to stay consistent, but I'd be fairly confident saying that he's going to average just 100 average that he has for the last 4 years. So, but there could also be a small uptick in kick-ins with Nasai in the midfield, right? Because if we looked at the kick-in numbers, Nasai did have a fair few, sort of in line with Jack Sinclair. So there is some scope that there's going to be more available to him. So definitely one we can watch out for. Again, he does have the round 4 bye, the same as Nasai Wanganimulura, and a tougher run. So a lot of those things are pushing, the wrong way for him in that sort of sense. I already spoke about a lot of new faces at St Kilda, but I think it's good to look at it as a whole because, again, they got SDK, Flanders, Savani, and I think they also picked up one more. I can't fully remember exactly who. But that's a lot of fresh faces that are going to take some fantasy points off of people that are already in the group. Obviously, some players will get dropped, but overall, we'll probably see, those guys that are coming in to have good fantasy output, especially with like the Flanders. We expect him to average nearly 100. Savani, who knows what he can do? Maybe he can do 70s or 80s in the halfback role for St Kilda. We all know that's sort of been a gold mine in the past for us. And then TDK, who really knows what's going to happen, obviously, with the dual ruck role with Rowan Marshall. So we expect those three guys to average quite decently. And there's going to have to be points that come off of other players in the squad. So Jack Sinclair could be one of those players that has that bad side of things there. So I personally feel like there will be a small drop for Sinclair here. Not massive. I still think he'll be here or, there about the marks. So, but it's probably enough for me to stay away from him as a starting selection. And he is at 3.3%. So that's enough for me. I don't think I will look at him much further. But yeah, if there's dramatic signs in the opening round that he's just going to be that man back there and be a Lockie Whitfield and do those sort of things, then you can't look past him at that sort of price range if he can increase his average. So if he goes massive against Collingwood, then there's always a possibility that you could start him because we all know he starts with Melbourne to start off with, and that could be a pretty fruitful matchup, but it does get tough from there, as I mentioned before. So that was him at number 5. Number 6, so this is the end of the top 6 defenders, is Lockie Ash. Obviously, had a breakout season in 2025, increased his average quite drastically from that 75 price tag that he was the start of last year to 100, so that's a pretty significant jump. 25 points is quite impressive for a guy that I personally didn't see it coming. I had no real interest in him at the start of the last season, and it really took me by surprise. So I'm hoping to improve in that space this year to try and not write off anyone, at any point in time, and try and keep an open mind to these sort of things. But he just locked himself into top 6 territory last year. He just kept being super consistent with it. If we just look at his scores, yes, there were a few up and down moments where he hit 60s and stuff, but overall he was very consistent at hitting 110s and just not having too many floor games. This is the one that I wanted to mention, though. He did have a shocking game of 29 late in the season, so there's probably a bit of an argument to say that, that's not going to happen again, specifically against North Melbourne. I'm not really sure what happened. I did remember watching that game, but he just looked like he was nowhere to be seen. So there is probably a little bit of scope to say that he's a bit of value, but my gut feeling is that he will regress slightly just due to the fact that he did have such a massive jump in 2025, having that 25 points jump. I do feel like he will come down a little bit, because this other point that I want to touch on is that he was the second highest transition player behind Lockie Whitfield. So to think that we're talking about the two best transition point in the league is both in the same team, I just don't know if that's sustainable for such a team like this. So yeah, for me, I just feel like Lockie Ash will take a bit of a step back. So I wouldn't be starting him. I wasn't a huge fan last year, but there's no real way to say that there's no evidence that that's going to happen. So there's not too much I can really say. But the one thing when I looked into him and did a bit of research on him, is that I found that a lot of his scoring, his newfound fantasy scoring, came from the likes of kick-ins. So he increased his kick-ins by 3 per game, so that already equals 9 points. Or you're receiving the kick in from Lockie Whitfield out of the square, getting plus 6s. So he was able to get 28 points off kick-ins alone throughout the season. So yeah, he just was an absolute menace, and that's why we saw that big jump from him in that fantasy space. So I'm not expecting a huge drop off. Like I said, I think there'll be a few points of regression, but I still think he'll be thereabouts for the top 6. But as I mentioned already, with Lockie Ash, he does have Lockie Whitfield. Sorry, he does have the round 4 bye, which again isn't that concerning. But again, when we're talking premiums, they are missing a game, so it's not the greatest option. But it does have a good early fixture, so it's not something I'm ruling out at this stage, but not someone I'm hugely a fan of at this stage. And 2.5% ownership at the moment shows that as well. So, like I said, that is the top 6 done and dusted. We will talk about these next sort of 4 or 5 players just to sort of round out the premiums, I guess, that are sort of around that mark. And we'll talk about some of the guys that I expect to have a bit of scope. So, the next player on this list was Josh Dacos. Now, he is priced down at 94. So, a bit of a drop down from what Lockie Ash was, were 6 points different. So, there is that bit of a gap between the top 6 and this next sort of group that will huddle around this 95 to 90 sort of range, that are probably considered the, not underpriced premiums, but that next category of like premiums that are there or thereabouts, that if they were able to increase their average just slightly for whatever reasons, that they could become the top line guys. But Josh Dacos, priced at 94, just under $1 million, just makes you feel a little bit better paying up for someone like this. But he's gone back-to-back 94 average seasons. Obviously, he's been switched and changed with what his role was. In the past, he was sort of just a predominant winger. We saw last year that he went into this halfback distributor role, and we all thought that there was potentially that he could become a fantasy premium for us. And I know a lot of people went there last year, and it probably didn't quite pay off in the end. But we did see some pretty big scores from him throughout the year. But he did spend some quarters in the midfield, right? So that's one thing that I'll be keeping an eye on him this preseason, is that, with the likes of Pendlebury getting, a little bit older now, he's obviously the oldest player in the league. He'll be 38, I think, by the end of this season, and it could well and truly be his last season. Could we see the likes of Josh Dacos join his brother in the midfield and be a fantasy gun for us off the defensive line? Because you got to think of the players. Who's sort of in the midfield? You have the mainstay of Nick Dacos. Obviously, he's the main tag target no matter where you go. We saw the emergence of Ned Long last year as well. I expect he'll probably be in there a lot this year. DeGoey, obviously, he's had a lot of injury concerns over the last couple of years, so there's no guarantee that he'll be there. Tom Mitchell got delisted, so that opens up a spot potentially. So it's just something I want to flag a little bit that I've seen in these match simulations at Collingwood, that he is playing in a midfield role. But again, they're going to have to play 2 midfields to play against each other throughout these games through practice, so there's no guarantee that it's going to happen. So if he were to cement himself in a midfield role, I would definitely be a bit more encouraged to pick him, because when he went into the midfield, he showed a lot of signs that he could be a gun for us. Like, I know this is cherry picking exactly one quarter that he had throughout the season, but he scored an 82-point quarter where He had 17 disposals, he kicked 2 goals, and he just racked up the pill and took a lot of tackles as well. I can't remember exactly what game that was, but I think it was. No, it wasn't that one. I think it was this one, 132 against the likes of uh, Gold Coast. He just went in the guts in the last quarter and just absolutely racked up. So one to watch and a one I'd definitely be highly considering if he were to get more midfield time, because I feel like that could bump him up, an extra 5-10 points, and then we're talking premium status. And if we can pick up a guy at a cheap range, that's someone that we can lock in away for the year. That's a fantasy winning pick in my opinion, because you're saving a trade by not having to trade him out for the year, but you've also got him at a very decent price range to start off with, rather than paying up for these guys that are 10 points priced at, higher than him, that are going to do the very similar thing. So for that sort of reason, definitely one I want to look at. For me, if I was a coach of Collingwood right now, I'd be definitely looking at putting Josh Dacos in the middle, and that would free up Houston a lot. We all know sort of Houston had a bit of a rough year last year, obviously in his first year at Pies. So if they want to look to free up Houston a bit more off halfback, it would mean moving Josh Dacos elsewhere to allow Houston to become that main distributor off halfback. So but whether that's going to happen, I cannot tell you. I'm not a coach, but yeah, I would love to see that happen. The other thing, when I looking into it, he took a lot of kickouts, but he still was a sort of an equal kickout taker alongside Howe, so he didn't have the absolute guaranteed role that we'd like to see from our premiums. I guess if that's the one thing we see coming into this year is that he is the main kickout taker. That could mean a bit of an influx in kick-ins, because it doesn't take much for an extra 3 kick-ins a game to average, an extra 9 points. Then he's a premium right there. He then averages a 103 for the year, and he's in premium territory. So that's one thing I want to keep an eye on again, just with what is going to happen. But more than likely, I expect he's just going to do the exact same thing, because they don't want to change too much. But we'll wait and see. In terms of fixture, he does have the round 2 bye, so that is the trickier one again. So again, not ideal. He does have St Kilda to the start of the year, so that will be something to keep an eye on, that he could have a pretty good score opening round, but then he does run into a pretty tough fixture of Adelaide, GWS, Brisbane, who I think Adelaide was the third toughest, Brisbane was the toughest, GWS was, definitely up there as well. Before it, then it starts to become a little bit easier down the track, but not by much. So there's a lot of things I want to keep an eye on Josh Dacos, because again, I think he could be great. I think it just comes with the Dacos name, but not something I'm considering in my team just yet. Salem is the next one off the cuff, and I think he is someone that really needs to be considered as someone that could potentially be an underpriced premium. Priced at that 93, I sort of expect that the Melbourne backline is going to become a bit of a fantasy goldmine this year. Obviously, they're expected to go back further this year with the losing the likes of Petrarca and Oliver in their squad, so they're going to be relying on a bit more youth. So the ball may spend a bit more time down back. So he did increase his average last year, so he is priced at what his fantasy maximum output has been in the past. So there's no guarantee to say that he is value. But yeah, I think he could potentially lock himself in to be top 6 defender if everything goes his way. We've got to think and look at these sort of things. Is that Bowie? Jake, I think I can't remember his first name, but Bowie is injured for a large portion of the season, so that means Salem is going to have a much bigger role in terms of being the main guy back there. So he's going to take a lot more kick-ins, and that's going to free up points for Salem to take that. So that could already give him a bit of a bump to, see him jump up 5 points or something like that. Stephen May was sort of in and out of the side last year. He was the number 1 kick taker. So if we get any sort of sniff that Stephen May is potentially not in the main side for whatever reason going on, then that would again open up more kick-ins for someone like Stalem. So again, like I said, with Locks of Dacos, it doesn't take too many kick-ins extra to really bump up their fantasy output. So something I'm really intrigued in. Uh, but the downside to me, and the reason why I'm hesitant to just start to look at this one, is that I'm having flashbacks from last year when we just automatically picked the likes of Jaden Short last year, with the expectation that Richmond were going to go backwards and the ball was going to be down there a lot more. Uh, while that was still a good pick, Jaden Short, increased his average by about 10 points. It wasn't the groundbreaking result that we sort of all expected it to be, where he was going to become a top 6 defender and become this real premium. So the fact that this Christian Salem's already priced at 10 points above what Jaden Short was at, and we've got the same sort of feeling, it does scare me just that slight bit. But in terms of obviously the fixture, he doesn't have the opening round, so that means he does have that extra game. So that's why it's a bit more enticing for me that we can start him. He gets the extra game than a lot of the other premium defenders, and he could potentially go a little bit of upside as well. So for all those sort of reasons, I think it's definitely worthwhile considering him and having a good look in the preseason if he does become that main guy. And it'll be interesting to see the guys around him that also pick up. If you watch my previous videos, I'm pretty hot on CJ. I think he could potentially increase his average by a fair bit, being a halfback distributor for Melbourne as well. So, but they have other guys back there that can do that role. Windsor is another one that a lot of people are speaking about. Does he become a halfback distributor? I have heard of him stepping even into the midfield. So Melbourne just sort of all over the place that I need to see more to be confident on these picks. So yeah, definitely one to watch because I think he could be absolutely anything and really become a top line premium for us if given the right opportunity. Fixture's not terrible. I think it's one of the better fixtures of the defenders. Just behind Whitfield and Rosie, obviously. So yeah, definitely something that works in his favour as well. This next one, I don't think needs too much discussion because he is just trending at the wrong way since his heights of that 120 he had back in 2022, I want to say. Yeah, Rory Laird priced down at 93. Just no interest there for me. He's just being pushed out of that side with each and every game that goes by. I would love if Adelaide were to, start to have a main distributor off halfback and, give that main person to have the kicking duties. Then I'd have a bit more interest, but that doesn't seem to be changing, unfortunately. So I just don't see a world where Rory Laird is going to have any sort of improvement. He's already 32, will be 33 this year. But he's just been pushed out of the midfield and he seems to be going backwards. So there's no interest there for me. And he's down at 1.7% average. Ownership. What was Salem's percentage? 3.4. So a bit lower than I expected, but we'll have to see how that sort of develops throughout the preseason. The last one, the top 10, is Bailey Dale. And if you've been a long-term viewer of the channel, you'll know I am probably one of the bigger haters for Bailey Dale in the fantasy community of the content creators. But yeah, I don't know. It's similar to Laird in my point of view. He's just that. This is what I expect him to be. Just a 90s guy. He's already sort of got that main distributor role. He takes most of the kick-ins for his team. I just don't know if I see a world where he's going to take that next big leap to be a main distributor. And he's just too volatile for me, If we look at his numbers from last year, he just constantly has these 60s. Like it's, 90, 60, 80, 60, 110, 60. Then he does go on a bit of a stretch where he does hit a big ceiling of 150. But then again, the game next is like a 60. So it's very frustrating. I'd rather the consistency over the massive ceiling, in my opinion, because trying to pick those big, massive ceiling scores is definitely going to work against you when you were talking about a potential premium that we want to be able to stick a captaincy on. I'd rather have consistency rather than volatile scoring. So this is just not someone I've entertained at all. Obviously, opening round bye as well, so he does have the round 3, which isn't the worst. I think is one of the better buys to have. But he does have a pretty tough run to start the year. Like I said, the Lions, GWS, and Adelaide are really tough. After the bye, he goes Essendon, who we expect to be okay and be easy. Hawks are really tough. They were the second toughest last year, and then he sort of goes into a middling sort of back and forth fixture. So nothing to really impress me to really look to pick him. So for those sort of reasons, I'm not looking at starting him at all. 1.3% ownership, so I don't see any interest here for me. The other thing is that there's some potential movements happening within their squad. So there's talks that Liberatore will be has been training as a halfbacker this year. Looking to maybe move past him. He is getting, I think he's 34 this year, so maybe they're looking to move past him. Run Bont, Trelaw. They've got obviously a young Sanders coming into the mix. They've brought over Matthew Kennedy last year, so they've got to fit a lot of guys throughout the midfielders. Someone's going to have to be pushed out. Obviously, Ed Richards is someone that's moved into the midfield as well. So they've got a lot of guys that can run through there that they're going to have to play another position. So they've talked that Liberatore will maybe come back into the halfback role. Does that help Bailey Smith? Bailey Dale, not Bailey Smith. So I don't think so. If anything, it's gonna take points off him because we know Liberatore can demand a lot of the ball as he has done in the past. So there's no interest here for me, unfortunately. I know a few others will be a bit more bullish, but I'm not keen on it at this stage for a lot of different reasons. But that is the top 10 premiums, I guess, in the defensive line for us this year. Obviously, there will be guys that potentially pick up defender status throughout the year that will jump into this group potentially, but none that roll off the top of my head instantly. So for now, this will be our top 10. If we want to just quickly have a discussion of the next couple guys who also average sort of around that 90 price range, Noble, he obviously came over from Richmond and had a pretty phenomenal year for Gold Coast. I really didn't expect him to have such a good output, but I don't think we're going to see too much more of him in terms of him getting this sort of time. Like, this is just what I sort of expect of him. I don't know if I see the capacity to go that next level at this stage. Again, opening round, missing round 3. Does have a good fixture. That's one thing that I would be enticed by. It is a good fixture, but I think we're going to see a lot more of Daniel Rioli back there. Obviously, he was missing a lot of the last season through injury. So does that affect his role in any ways? If we look at some of his results, it did sort of start to fade away a little bit towards the back end of the season for many different reasons. He did drop a lot of 50s and 40s throughout the season. Not a lot, sorry. He dropped 2 and a low 60 as well, but it's enough to say that I don't know if I see the huge ceiling. He didn't have the biggest ceiling. I think his biggest score was 117 throughout the year, so not the biggest ceiling yet. So I don't think it's one I'm interested in at the moment, even though he may be a few points unders with those scores. Clark, this one I could be a bit more enticed with because, again, doesn't have the opening round bye. Well, I don't know why I keep saying opening round bye. It doesn't have an early bye with Fremantle being out of that loop. But with Luke Ryan injured at the moment, if he was to look like and get a few more kick-ins back there, again, that could just be enough to creep him up to the next sort of bracket and get him closer to the top 6 defenders, and then you'd be quite a few points unders for what he could do, because we have seen from the past that he can be really good and can put up some really decent fantasy scores. But the thing that also works against him is the Fremantle game style of being quicker, that transition footy, trying to move it as fast forward as possible. So they're not chipping it around and giving a lot of +6s to these sort of guys that are off halfback. So one I want to watch in the preseason, but is lower down the list for me. And Mills, I think we'll finish off with this one because he's the last one priced within the 90 range. He's injured at the moment, so that's, one of the major reasons why I wouldn't look at him too much. But looks like he's just going to play as a halfback distributor like he was last year, so I don't know how much upside he's going to potentially have. I feel like this is what he was just going to be like, He had a couple of 60s and 70s in there, but he did also pop up and have a couple hundreds in that role. So his scoring came in big spurts. Like, he just would have none of the peel for like 10 minutes, but then he'd just go on this 5-minute spree and get 30 points very quickly. Obviously, he is the captain, or I believe he's still the captain of Sydney this year. I don't know if it's been announced, but he was the captain last year. Obviously, only played the 12 games, so If there's any talks that he goes back into a midfield role, I'd be more appealed. But I think they sort of have moved past to him in that sort of sense, with the likes of Heaney, Goulden, Warner, all those sort of guys that are younger than him at this stage, and probably a bit more damaging by foot. So yeah. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed. That is the last one I'll talk about in this video. So hopefully I've convinced you enough to start one of the premiums. You don't absolutely have to. Like I said, there's a lot of value in the defensive line this year. So it's definitely going to be an interesting discussion going forward for the remainder of the preseason. But yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Please love you, like, subscribe, and do all those great things. If you have any questions down below, chuck them there, and I will respond as much as possible. Maybe there's someone I haven't discussed, or maybe I missed the point that you've done more research than I have. I'd be more than free to fill me in, because yeah, always looking to try and get an upper hand on the rest of the competition, because it is super tough these days. But yeah. All the best, guys. I will catch you in the next one where we're talking about the value defenders. Cheers.